Hi everyone, my name is Sarah Chandoo. I'm with the 103.1 FM newsroom and I'm here with Mr. Arun Seenath to take a look at the 2024-2025 budget presentation. It was quite a budget presentation yesterday, over 5 hours long. So before we get into it, a little background about our guest. Mr. Seenath is a partner at Deloitte. He leads the firm's business process services and taxation practice in Trinidad. He's a chartered accountant with over 20 years' experience in the field of audit and assurance, business process outsourcing, taxation and information technology. He's also the vice president of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Trinidad and Tobago and a fellow of the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants. Welcome, Mr. Sina. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Sarah.
So, a lot would have been said yesterday. 5 hours and just under 15 minutes of things were said at the budget presentation. I would like to begin by asking your initial thoughts. When that budget presentation was finished, finally, what were your thoughts on it?
Well, Sarah, it was a very long day. I think the minister, he's one of the longest serving ministers of finance consecutively. And I think he went for some records. And I think that was the longest budget presentation in his history. But I thought that the budget, after hearing the minister read through his different headings and when he spoke to the measures that he was putting in place, I thought that from his perspective, he thought that over the years he's built up some level of stability in terms of revenue generation and expenditure levels. And I believe that from my perspective as well, I think that the minister has done several good things over the years. It's difficult to please everyone. I mean, from any perspective. But I think that when you look at the budget from an independent perspective, you can say that it was, in the grand scheme of things, some level of acceptability.
Well, it's another deficit package as well. Estimated revenue $54.224 billion dollars and expenditure set at $59.741 billion dollars. Of course, that's taking into consideration a predicted oil and gas price over the next year. Of course, it could change. That deficit could be bigger or smaller depending on that. What's your thought, though, on another deficit budget?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the region, I think when you look at all our neighbors, Trinidad is relatively in a stronger position than a lot of our neighbors, barring Guyana. I think when you look at the prices that the minister underpinned the budget to, the prices do seem optimistic as compared to the current prices. But I mean, those are prices at a given point in time. There's no guarantees how those prices can turn out. If there's some level of instability in different parts of the world, geopolitical issues, supply and demand issues, then the prices can change. So it's difficult to say that the prices are incorrect, but I think the minister would have done his homework in terms of getting information from the relevant producers and suppliers and upstream business, downstream business, to have some idea in terms of the level of taxation that they would be paying over the next 12 months. And I think that was the basis for his determination of his revenue generation. I mean, I know that deficit financing, and I think it's been over a decade of deficit financing. Even I think our surplus came in 2022 mainly because of the geopolitical issues with Ukraine and Russia. But yeah, I mean it's not something that's uncommon across the globe as well.
Mhm. Well, I would say I think one of the talking points coming out of it actually came closer to the end, where the minister announced that there would be a minimum wage increase, but for public sector workers only. So this is not a national minimum wage increase. Some persons, I've read some commentary that maybe it should have been done across the board. Of course, we did have a national minimum wage increase last year. The minister hinted very soon in the future we could see another national minimum wage increase. But what do you think about that move for public sector workers? Do you think it's going to put any pressure on the private sector in terms of offering competitive salaries, especially?
Well, I think when the minister identified specific groups, and he spoke to CPAP, URP, MTS, which is on the lower scale, and really on you know it's a very small increase, and I don't see it affecting the market substantially. I think if the minister went for a national increase in minimum wage, then you'd be looking at inflationary factors being impacted. I think over the last 2 years, the minister has done a fairly good job in terms of managing the level of inflations when you compare us to other bigger countries, even bigger countries. So countries of our size, when you look at the benchmarks, we're still doing pretty well compared to those other countries.
He hinted as well, like I said, that the national minimum wage increase could be revised perhaps very soon. Any thoughts on your part about how soon that should be done?
Well, I think it is difficult to say because until we see some level of prolonged improved activity, then I think it can be looked at. I mean, I know the opposition leader said it should be increased um, to $25, and I think if you were to do that, you'd see almost an immediate effect on inflation. So I think it has to be managed, and I think the minister. It's good that he mentioned it in the conversation because it means that he's thinking about it. But at the end of the day, it's something that we have to manage through the process because once inflation starts to skyrocket, then the prices of everything go up.
Mhm. I want to get into your area of specialty now. You are a tax specialist. So, with regard to taxes, he talked about the Gaming Act being put into effect officially from next year. He mentioned the property tax and the revenue that would have been earned so far. Uh, there was the announcement of a tax and NIS amnesty, VAT refunds, and so on, the TNT Revenue Authority. What's your take as a tax specialist on the tax aspect of the budget as he spoke about it?
Yeah, I mean, so let's take it as you laid it out. So in terms of the gaming taxes, I think he's mentioned that for the last maybe 3 4 years.
Mhm.
So it's good that it will be rolled out and taxes collected. I think it's a stream of taxes that the minister is missing out on, and he, we have to police compliance a little more because I know it's difficult to capture, especially these smaller operations where you have machines set up in various restaurants and bars and those things. And I think the taxes on that could be quite substantial. I believe, I've been aware of some instances where individuals and businesses have paid almost 100 and something thousand dollars per year in taxes. So when you compile that list, you're looking at well over 100, maybe 200 bars that are possibly impacted. So you can look at maybe raising 20 to $50 million in additional tax revenue. When you look at the property tax, there was a strong indication that people wanted to pay their property tax. I know there were protests outside Parliament yesterday asking for the removal of the property tax, but a large sector of the population did pay their taxes. And I think if the minister had put a lot of things in place ahead of time, you would have seen a larger collection of the property taxes. But there is a strong indication that people recognize that there's a need to pay their property tax, and they will pay it once the facilities are there for them to be able to pay it. But yeah, I mean the expectation from property tax could easily be about maybe 3 to 400 million dollars in additional revenue, and that's revenue the country never had. So that additional revenue will allow the minister to offset any additional expenditure that he had. So that's an important revenue stream as well. The minister did mention that there's a tax amnesty coming on stream with the TTRA on the horizon, and I think that's something that is very important for taxpayers to pay attention to because over the last 15 years, I think we've had roughly about 6 or 7. And I know the minister is saying that this could potentially be the last. as a tax professional, I don't know if I truly ever believe that there's a last amnesty. So the amnesties provide a tool for governments to raise revenue, large amounts of revenue in a short space of time. And it worked well in the past for previous administrations, and it has worked well for this administration as well. So, it's an important tool to have in your pocket. And I think it's good that the minister offers this because I think in 2023 is really when businesses started to climb out of the impact of COVID-19 and went back to business as usual. So it's important to recognize the fact that cash flows would have been stifled, and giving businesses and individuals a chance to catch up with their taxes, I think will be very useful in this time, especially NIS, because I think in terms of NIS as well, um, interest and penalties and those things being waived is a substantial savings to companies. So that, from my perspective, is very useful to see, and I know from my clients' perspective, they will be happy to see this.
I think one of the fears, if we want to describe it as that, from the with regard to the TNT Revenue Authority, was something in the public domain that it's going to go after those small businesses, the doublesmen, the nutsmen, and that sort of thing. Yesterday, the minister made a point to address that specifically. Do you think that's going to go a long way in reassuring small businesses in particular? Because I know they have so many issues that they've been raising. Crime is one. That TNT Revenue Authority is another matter, and it's important, according to the minister, to encourage small and medium enterprises, especially.
Yeah, I mean, I know the minister specifically spoke about it, but me being a tax professional and seeing my clients and myself pay large amounts of taxation, I think tax is everybody's business. And if you're earning a level of income that you should be paying taxes, you should pay your taxes. If you're not, that's fine. I mean, if you're earning below the relevant levels of personal allowance and those things, I think it's unnecessary for you to pay your taxes. But I know the minister did indicate that he's not looking at the street side vendors, and most of the time those vendors don't earn up to $7,500 a month. So that's realistic. I know in the last, I think in the last 6 months, there were news articles where the Board of Inland Revenue went after some medium-sized big businesses. So that's a good sign that the tax arm is taking action to collect these outstanding taxes. Because when you quantify the amounts just related to those two matters alone, it was about 150 to 200 million, which is a substantial amount. So I think it's very important for the TTRA to work well, but the systems have to be in place, the processes have to be in place. It has to improve the efficiency of tax registrations, tax collections, tax assessments, etc. And I think then it can work well. Otherwise, you're going to see us sinking into just having a BIR 2.0.
Mhm. Could we turn now to Forex? Forex, I think, is probably one of the most pressing um, financial issues being discussed at the ground level in this country, access to Forex, especially. Are you satisfied with anything that the minister would have discussed regarding Forex? Do you think those concerns that people would have regarding access to it were addressed in any way?
Yeah, so I mean, forex is one of the most difficult things to come by, and for small businesses is increasingly difficult. I think what the minister did mention was in terms of requiring oil and gas companies to pay all their taxes in US dollars. I think that will go a long way, and not only oil and gas companies, but if you can also look at multinational companies that have access to U.S. dollars internationally to pay their taxes in U.S. dollars. I mean, it may not be something that he may be able to legislate because not all their earnings will be in U.S. dollars. But I think if you can encourage people to do that and add an incentive from a corporation tax standpoint, then it will provide a source of U.S. dollars to be able to distribute to small and medium-sized businesses. But I know in terms of trade and exports and those things, it's increasingly difficult and increasing that burden on small and medium sized businesses. So Forex is
What is
something
it?
that has to be looked at specifically, and I know he tried to address it in terms of the Exim Bank, and some of those facilities have worked well, but some of the feedback that we've gotten as well from companies is that they're just not able to access it, even in cases where they are manufacturing items for export. It's difficult for them to access the Forex facility in the Exim Bank.
What about his assessments with regard to the HSF? He said that we have about 5.5 billion USD or 7 months cover in foreign reserves, and the HSF stands at 6.1 billion US dollars.
Yeah, so again, it's you have to look at Trinidad in the grand scheme of things, and again, I'd like to reference the region because when you compare us to our neighbors, I think in terms of accumulated savings, we are actually in one of the better positions in the region, and even in Latin America and South America as well. So again, it should have been more. There's no question about it. I think if we had continued earning at high levels and restructured the way we do things economically, diversify in different areas, then we could have not have to tap into the HSF over the last couple of years. Granted that he did do so during COVID, which I think was a very unique situation. In our lifetime, it's one of the most unique situations economically that a country could have faced. So granted that he had to go into the HSF during that period, and I think from my perspective, that's acceptable. But I know that he's accessed the HSF subsequently, and I think that's something that we need to manage because if we're gonna put aside for future generations, then it's definitely something that we don't want to go to every time.
Your thoughts on the general economic outlook as well. So the minister mentioned 3 consecutive years of positive growth, which shows a renewal in economic activity. Well, you mentioned previously that you think the minister has been doing a pretty good job in terms of managing things. Would you like to weigh in on these consecutive years of growth? What that means for us moving into 2025 and perhaps 26, 27?
Yeah, so I think in terms of the period of growth, it's really been generated internally with any country because there hasn't been large amount of foreign direct investment coming into the country over the last 3 years. So it's been an uptick in economic activity post COVID, which was really maybe recovery post COVID. So from my perspective, I think it's acceptable, but again, you have to look at things in the grand scheme, and when you look at periods of growth compared to different countries not having those growth numbers, Trinidad comparatively is still doing well. I think one of the biggest challenges we face as a country is crime, which is on the minds of everyone. Which is for me as a taxpayer, it's one of the most important things. And I think the minister has, in the budget, outlined a couple of steps, which we'll probably hear more from the Minister of Finance, but sorry, Minister of National Security. But I think when he spoke to some drone vessels. He spoke to offshore patrol vessels. He spoke to 2,000 vehicles for police over the next 3 years. I think that capital investment is important in curbing and controlling crime. But again, we have to have a strategy to have these things done because crime fighting isn't rocket science, I think.
You mentioned those crime measures. I was actually going to bring that up as well, and ask for your opinion as uh, a citizen of this country in terms of the crime measures outlined, because crime, it's impacting everything. A lot of business persons were hoping perhaps for something a little more definite. Are you satisfied with some of the measures with regard to crime management?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not completely satisfied. I think it shows that things are being done, but better things can be done. And I think from the perspective as a citizen, I absolutely love my country, and I'm a patriot to heart. And I think the only thing that bothers me the most in the country is our crime situation. And as an individual, the most important thing I'd like to know is that my family and myself are safe and secure at the end of the day. And where I don't have that level of security, then you question the people in charge. So again, I mean, me and a couple of friends, we've thought all this crime issue, and I think again, there's not a situation where it can't come under control. I understand that there are different measures in curbing crime. There are short-term measures, medium-term, and long-term measures, and I think education has to go a long way. But just yesterday I was speaking to someone who was referencing the persons who write SEA exams versus the number of people who write CSEC exams. There's a fall away of about 4,000 persons per year. So the question is, where are those 4,000 people going? And there's a large likelihood that some of that, a percentage of that, is going to the gang. So education is a big part of dealing with those issues as well, family planning and different things. So it has to, there has to be a coordinated approach to fixing crime. But I think in the short term, the first thing we need to get under control is murders, and violent crime.
Education, you brought it up as well. It brought to mind that measure that the minister announced in terms of a CSEC remedial mathematics program. So you pointed to the difference between SEA students going on to write CSEC, and then we do have um, some pretty dire results when it comes to students writing CSEC. The education sector did get a pretty hefty budget, the second largest allocation in the budget, actually. Do you think that's enough? And are you surprised at the allocations that were given? Health, number one, education and training, two, national security, three, and then we have a pretty significant gap between those three and the other areas of focus.
Yeah, I mean, it's so you have to really go into the details to see what the minister is spending those funds on, and I really haven't been able to go into all the details because of the short time. But I
Mhm.
think that, I mean, we'll see it in the upcoming budget debate, where the various ministers speak to what their initiatives are in the various ministries. But I think one of the biggest challenges we have, um, is talking a lot about what we plan to do, and executing on, following through on execution on those plans. And I think when you look at the history, not only of this administration but administrations gone by, there's a very low percentage of initiatives that are executed, maybe 60% or lower. So talking about it is fine, and having grand plans and those things are fine, but we have to get to a point of executing on what our plans are.
So we've covered some specific things in the budget. I mean, it was a lot coming out yesterday, as I mentioned at the start. Is there anything that we have not discussed, or perhaps you haven't being heard discussed enough that you think people should take note of?
Well, so one of the things, I think I mentioned it last night on one of the programs I was on. So the minister did mention, the payment of VAT refunds and VAT bonds, which is an important stream of cash flow for small and medium-sized businesses. So I think this was an excellent initiative. I mean, the minister said he was going to pay small and medium-sized businesses their VAT refunds under 250,000 before the end of this year, which is very ambitious, I think. And when you look at the VAT bonds for larger refunds, coming on stream in 2025, this is a strong indication that, if you put that cash flow back in the hands of the businesses, you will see renewed investment. You see job creation and different things. So it's important, I think, from a government's perspective, to make sure that they continue to roll out those VAT refunds, continue to pay their contractors and service providers, because again, that's necessary cash flow to go back into the working capital of a business, to ensure that they could continue to employ persons and generate economic activity. One thing the minister mentioned as well is the potential for back pay coming on stream during 24-25, which again, causes a boost in economic activity, because what people do first when they get additional cash flow is they spend it. So you'll have economic activity being generated. And I think if the minister is able to do that before the December period, you would see an uptick in spending during the Christmas season, and into 2025. So I think these things definitely help the economy, help to generate economic activity. But again, we have to bear in mind that inflation is something that we need to look at and manage. So it's a hard balancing act, but I think thus far the minister has done a fairly good job in stabilizing that situation. Like I said, it's difficult to please everyone, and the question is always asked: how does the man on the street feel? And you maybe it go 50-50 or 75-25, where people are satisfied or not satisfied. How it impacts them in terms of their cost of traveling, in terms of their cost of groceries. So the budget can't only speak to businesses. It can't only speak to um, big business. It has to speak to everyone, and everyone has to feel that they're benefiting from the budget and the initiatives that government has. So I think you're going to get mixed reviews, but from a business perspective and from the initiatives that I see the minister putting in place, I think this is it puts us in a form of stability that can propel to growth as necessary over the coming years. But again, conditions have to be put in place for us to be able to achieve that growth. So we have to look at diversification. We have to look at different revenue streams in terms of what types of industries we want to look at. I mean, Trinidad is a paradise when it comes to sun. We have sun almost 12 months of the year. We have wind, and we haven't utilized those advantages the way some of our Caribbean neighbors have. So I think although we've done fairly well compared to the others, I think there's always a lesson to be learned from what the others have been doing and what we can do differently.
Was there anything that you were expecting to see, or maybe hoping to see that you didn't see in the budget?
Not specifically. I think that the minister. I didn't expect much actually, and I think the minister didn't really say much in terms of tax changes, because I always look at it from a perspective of a taxman. But again, bearing in mind that it does impact me as an individual, as a normal citizen of the country. But from a tax perspective, I didn't expect to see any major changes, and no major changes were indicated. I think the only change really is the tax amnesty. And I know that, again, like the minister said, it might be the last, but again, in my history and my practice, I just don't think it will be.
Well, thank you so much. I want to wrap up by asking you a very simple question. Could you give me three words to describe the budget from your perspective?
I would say it was conservative. I would say it's encouraging stability, and maybe setting a foundation for growth.
Well, thank you so much again, Mr. Seenath, for your time, for engaging us in this discussion as well. It was much appreciated.
Thanks for having me, Sarah.